Hey Vision Chasers, this is Dr. Byrd here with another social studies lesson for you today. Today we're going to discuss the American Revolution. And what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to take all of that information and I'm going to compact it into this lesson. And in this lesson, I'm going to compact it into an acronym, FREE, F-R-E-E. And I'll explain to you what those mean as we go on. But remember, with this lesson is going to be a foundation for you to build upon once you get in the classroom and your teacher has you do other assignments pertaining to the American Revolution. So with that being said, let's get started. So the first F stands for the French and Indian War. French and Indian War. Now the British colonists are going to win this war with help from the king in the form of the troop support. Now, considered by many historians to be the first worldwide conflict, the French and Indian War can also be referred to as the 7 Years' War. Now, it's important to keep in mind that the British were not the only ones living on the North American continent at this time. It was also inhabited by the French as well. You see, the French, they took a look around, they saw that the British were building an empire, and the French decided, hey, we want to have an empire too. And so there was a disagreement between the British and the French on who was to occupy what parts of the North American continent. So as I said before, this war involved the British and the French. Now the French, they have a pretty significant ally in the Native Americans. You see, the French, they treated the Native Americans a little bit better than the British colonists, and so the Native Americans fought on the side of the French in this war. So this conflict begins in 1754 when the French build a fort on land that the British had previously claimed. Now, the Virginia governor sent in the militia led by this 22-year-old lieutenant colonel. His last name was Washington. And as you can guess already, his first name was George. George Washington went in to remove the French. Now, ultimately, George Washington was unsuccessful, and this is going to begin the war. So the British would win this war in 1763. So in all, Great Britain would claim all of North America east of the Mississippi River, as well as Florida, which they received from their Spanish allies. Now, the Native Americans would lose a great deal because they lost their ally in the French. Now, the French would be greatly upset about this loss, but don't forget about the French because they're going to have their revenge. We're going to see them again, so don't forget them. So that's F. Next up is R for rebel. The colonists rebel against the new laws and taxes. Now, fighting a war is very costly, and for that very reason, many governments do not want to remain constantly in a state of war. And so that was the issue with the King of Great Britain. He did not want to have to continue to support the colonists in war. And so he made some decisions. And these decisions didn't come out of nowhere. They were based on certain realities that existed. Great Britain was in a lot of debt as a result of the French and Indian War. Now, in an effort to lower the debt, Great Britain would pass a number of taxes on certain goods that most people used. Now, this would be known as the Stamp Act. Now, the colonists were angered by these taxes. Now, many colonists disobeyed these laws, but when they were caught, they were immediately found guilty without official court proceedings, without a jury. Wow, that seems to be a foreshadowing of something to come. I can't put my finger on it. It's something. I think there may be an amendment that has something to do with that. I can't think of it now, but maybe you can. Now, in an effort to prevent angering Native Americans even further, the proclamation of 1763, which banned British colonial settlements west of the Appalachian Mountains, It made colonists very unhappy, and so you had many of them disobeying this as well. Now, ultimately, this is going to be about land. The colonists, they wanted to explore this land, they wanted to lay claim to this land so they could settle it and eventually make money off of it. And the king was telling them that you can't do that. Now, the colonial complaints would grow even louder as they asked for representation in the British Parliament. Now, the British Parliament is very similar to the United States Congress. That's the law-making body. So they wanted representation before any more laws were passed that concerned the colonists. Seems simple enough. Now, the colonists would take it a little bit further by even destroying British property in protest. Now, later, in an effort to make all colonists quit and bow down to the authority of the king, the Quartering Act was passed. Now the Quartering Act forced colonists to provide room and board for the British soldiers who were there to make sure that the colonists were obeying the king's rules. Now, quartering, I seem to remember something about quartering in the Constitution as well. I can't quite think of it right now, but maybe you can. I know that you have a better understanding of the Constitution than I do right now. So which amendment was that? The first E in free. We've covered F, we've covered R, and now that first E is for engage. Both sides are going to engage in physical battle. Now, before we go any further, it's important to identify the colonists. Now, the colonists at this point, you have the patriots. Those are the people who are loyal to the colonial efforts to create a new nation separate from the king. And then the loyalists, obviously, those are the ones they're loyal to the king. They want to be a part of the British Empire. So keep that in mind as we go forward. So before this war officially begins, shots had already been fired. There was one afternoon on March 5th, 1770. There was an increased presence of British soldiers that placed a strain on the relationship between colonists and the soldiers and the British Crown. A group of British soldiers opened fire on a group of protesters, leaving 4 dead. Now, this incident was the Boston Massacre. Now, it'll be 5 years later that the war between the colonists and the British Empire would officially begin on April 19th, 1775, with the Battle of Lexington. It was a simple victory for the British. However, they were slaughtered by Minutemen as they marched to Concord looking for colonial weapons. Now, Minutemen were simply civilians that had to be ready at a minute's notice. So that is the first E, and the last E, as we finish this out, is exit. The British exit the colonies in defeat. Now, this war was supposed to be won by the British. They had a better military. However, they couldn't overcome the fact that colonists had a better understanding of the geography of North America. The British were never able to secure the entire area and protect the loyalists who wanted to remain with Great Britain. Now, additionally, the hit and run tactics overwhelmed the British soldiers. You see, they were used to what you've seen in many movies. They were used to the volley system where we line up across each other. You fire, I fire, you fire, I fire, and the side that has the most people still living, that's the side that wins. And the participation by the civilian patriots was amazing. The number of civilians who would just drop their shovels, drop their pitchforks, leave their farms to fight was just overwhelming, and the British were not ready for these numbers. And additionally, slavery would be a factor as well. There was an Emancipation Proclamation issued in 1775 by the king to all slaves, stating that if they helped fight for the king against the colonists, then they could win their freedom. Well, this was a mistake on the king's part because he didn't take into account that the southern slaveholders who really wanted to keep their slaves, what they did was they supported the patriots so that they can continue to keep their slave labor. Now, last but not least, as I told you before, the French would enter the war. They would have their revenge. They would enter the war on the side of the Patriots. Still bitter from the French and Indian War, the French jumped at the opportunity to humiliate the British king. So the British would formally surrender on October 17th, 1781, and the peace treaty would be signed 2 years later in September of 1783. Well, with that, the Revolutionary War gave birth to a whole new country. And George Washington made a tremendous name for himself for his perseverance throughout this war. He experienced more defeats than victories, but he was revered by many, and eventually, with the birth of the Constitution, he would be the first president of the United States of America. Well, that's our social studies lesson for the day. Please feel free to check the Vision Chasers website for more tips and tools to help you as you pursue your vision of success. Also, there is a worksheet for download available with this video. Please check that out to further help you understand the American Revolution. Thank you so much for watching, and until we meet again, please keep chasing the vision. Bye.